And now, the news. And in this week's edition, Ferrari outsources its design to someone competent, a 1,000 horsepower vacuum cleaner goes into production, and Renault swaps cruise control for cruise missiles. Ferrari have introduced the Luce, or at least the interior of the Luce, or at least some components that will make up the interior of the Luce. And for those who think it's pronounced loose, you're wrong. That's just a nickname given to the latest girlfriend to enter the Ferrari stable. No, it's pronounced luce, and it means light or illumination. The irony in that statement being that it's tipped to be Ferrari's heaviest ever vehicle. The release of these images and videos are part of Ferrari's drip feed of info about the car, which will culminate in a late May unveiling of the car itself. They've made a big noise about Jony Ive, the legendary Apple designer, being involved with the design. And it's immediately obvious given some areas look genuinely well thought out, and other areas look like they were designed by an ape. So let's start with the good. There's a lot going on here, so I'm going to try to unpack it nicely. But I think it's very important to know that I am at full attention throughout this part of the video. The key is made up purely of Corning Gorilla Glass, and it has an e-ink display. This display is yellow most of the time, but when you insert it into its cutout on the center console, it turns black in order to blend in with the rest of it. To make it even better, because it's e-ink, it only uses power when changing colors, so it's not like an LED screen that's constantly drawing power, because otherwise you'd end up with a key with a flat battery every day. Ferrari highlights that this is because of the bistable properties of e-ink, and in all honesty, I thought bistable was like a goth chick, and unstable was an emo. Turns out I've learned something today. Alongside the key sits the shifter, which lights up when you insert the key. It's small and subtle, but it's also made out of glass. The way the key and the shifter interact is a pure work of art. Next, we have all the buttons and switches. These look like something out of an aeroplane, and I get the feeling that was intentional. Because they've been designed to be ergonomic in that they feel different and you always have a good idea of what you're pressing. And I think that's kind of the obvious thing. But the more subtle one is a nod to how aeroplane cockpits are designed as well. Because with planes, you don't want the pilot flipping the wrong switch and crashing. So you make sure certain systems can only be operated in certain ways. And there's something of that going on with this interior as well. I have no idea if it's intentional or not, but it's something worth nerding out over to me. This also leads me on to the point that there are so many physical buttons. Jony Ive himself has said that touchscreens don't make sense in cars, and while the Luce will have touchscreens, they won't be the primary mechanism of interaction. In a world where everyone went so hard on touchscreens in cars, it's so refreshing to hear someone who actually understands design thoroughly use their brain when it comes to this subject. And the last point here is the gauges. I won't lie, I read through the notes a few times and I still don't understand how they're making them look so good. It appears they're using layers of really thin OLED screens that were developed with Samsung, along with real needles, not digital ones, to create depth to them and make it easier to read. So instead of the flatness associated with digital readouts, these mimic real gauges but with the ability to still customize them and such. I legitimately want to see these in real life because it sounds incredible. And now on to the not so good. Firstly, the steering wheel might be inspired by those of the 50s and 60s Ferraris, but it looks like someone stuck a few extra buttons on a cheap racing wheel for video games. Typical Apple logic. Copy something that already exists, slap your name on it, and call it revolutionary. Also, while we're in this area, it has shift pedals, which, given that this is an EV, can only mean Ferrari are going to be faking gear shifts just like the rest of the industry. Next is the control panel, in other words, the center screen. It swivels, which is cool in theory, but because it's not integrated into the dash, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Then there's that weird bar running across it. They say it's a palm rest, so it's more comfortable to use it, but it looks like it was glued on by an overzealous child who found some scrap metal and super glue. And this leads me on to a larger issue throughout the whole theme of this interior: the excessive use of aluminium. Ferrari went to great lengths in their press release to let us know that it's all recycled aluminium and it gives a premium feel and all of that. But what they seem to have forgotten in an oh so adorably Ferrari way is that cars sit in the sun a lot, and aluminium gets hot in the sun. So you won't be able to rest your palm or touch your steering wheel because if you do, you'll burn yourself. And I don't think winter will solve the issue either, because that same aluminium that just tried to burn you, in the opposite season will get really cold and you won't want to touch it either. But then I suppose that means they'll probably never get dirty. So swings and roundabouts. And speaking of things you don't want to touch, let's touch on the excessive use of glass. Don't get me wrong, it looks beautiful and the press images do their best to sell it. But in the real world, all these glass surfaces will just be a magnet for dust and fingerprints, meaning these images are the cleanest you'll ever see this interior. So what are my final thoughts on this? Well, the ergonomics are fantastic, and a lot of the design is really well thought out. The physical buttons and switches are a breath of fresh air, and the time spent to refine this interior looks really well spent. That said, we'll only truly know if it's been a success once people get their hands on the car and get to use all of these functions. And I'd be curious to see what the interior looks like in the vehicle, because while elements of it look fantastic, when viewed as a whole, it looks something better suited to a Mini than a Ferrari. Lastly, something often missing in EVs is that they feel clinical and soulless, kind of like a vacuum cleaner or a microwave. Just an appliance that does the job really well, but with no emotion. So with that in mind, given the amount of theatre on display just with this interior, I really do wonder if Ferrari have cracked the code on making EVs come to life a little bit more, rather than being comparable to a toaster. Come the 25th of May, the car's full reveal will prove that theory right or wrong. The McMurtry Spéirling is like that one ex-girlfriend you had, because it sucks like a champ, but it's also completely mad. For the uninformed, this is an electric car that pushes out 1,000 horsepower, does 0 to 100 km per hour in 1.5 seconds, and does a sub 8 second quarter-mile time. It also holds the hill climb record at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, as well as the lap record at the old Top Gear test track. To put it into perspective, it beat actual Formula 1 cars in achieving those numbers. But all of that is only achievable because of two giant fans. And I'm not talking about the creatures that roll into an anime convention without deodorant or their dignity. I mean literal fans. The whole premise is that the car gets sucked to the ground to produce downforce, an idea that briefly found its way into Formula 1 in the 70s. And McMurtry have proven this concept to work consistently over the last 3 years, with the aforementioned records as well as a demo where they actually drove the car upside down for 5 seconds using this fan. The fan underneath is so strong that it could in theory hold 2 of these cars upside down, with the car weighing less than a ton and the fan producing 2 tons of downforce. So those who've been paying attention will know that this car has popped up pretty much everywhere in the last 3 years, and with that in mind, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this £1 million lawnmower has already taken up residence in every car collector's garage by now. But no, it turns out they've been on a 3-year promotional tour of the vehicle, and the production versions will start reaching customers in the second half of the year under the name Spéirling Pure. It's unlikely this car will be road legal, as strangely, a single-seater car with more reliability as a vacuum cleaner than a pothole survivor isn't favoured by lawmakers. At some point they are expecting to release a road legal version, but how they'll achieve roadworthy status with 2 child and small dog blenders attached to it is anyone's guess. It's possible they'll have to remove the fans altogether, which means all of its downforce goes as well, along with any chance of taking a corner without crashing. So for now, we'll just have to deal with the track-only version that actually works. To facilitate production, McMurtry have opened a factory that will produce the cars but will also have space for R&D for future models. No word on whether these future vehicles will also be ready to suck and find ways to be fast and light, but given the company is all about pushing the boundaries of what's possible, it wouldn't be surprising to see new hypersonic riding mowers come out of this company one day. What do you think car manufacturers did during the World Wars? If you guessed made weapons for their country, then you are correct. Well, we may be nearly a century on from those horrible times, but history does tend to rhyme. And this week the rhyme is to the tune of Renault starting to build drones for the French Ministry of Defense. Yes, you heard that right. Renault has confirmed that it will build up to 600 flying baguettes to secure the skies above Europe. The drones will be oven-baked with the help of a defense contractor, so it won't rely on Renault having to learn how to do it from scratch.
Very striking when you sit as close to an orangutan as this.
Renault also insists that this work won't affect its automotive plans, but did admit that it saw itself as an ideal candidate given its know-how in designing, industrializing, and mass-producing high-tech products, as well as its capacity to keep quality, costs, and deadlines under control. This is part of a wider push throughout Europe from automotive vehicle and parts manufacturers to help the continent defend itself. Parts companies like Valeo, ZF, and Marley already make parts for military equipment, although they, like Renault, stress that it's a small part of their overall income and isn't expected to become their main source of revenue, at least until the war starts. This did get me thinking though, what weapons could each European country provide to safeguard against war? Well, the French are already making drones. The Germans could do some ICBMs. The Italians could provide some ammo. The Spanish could provide equipment transport. The Austrians could provide the leadership for the war effort. The Irish could produce some bomb expertise, the Dutch the ground forces, the Norwegians can provide Majin Buu, weirdly enough, and the British can provide the food. Not to Europe, to Europe's enemies. War is bad enough without turning friendly fire on. And you know, with all of these nations coming together and bringing their crack experts, providing so much specialist knowledge, I think Europe should be safe for the foreseeable future from pretty much anything the world can throw at it. This segment needs a new name, because broken vehicles aren't just slipping the fence anymore. There doesn't seem to be a fence at all. And these recalls always end up with a fire or an explosion, so it's not even like these are small issues, they're potentially fatal ones. So we're just going to have to change this name to something more appropriate, like Karahu Akbar, or Al-Qaeda, or Boko Haram, or Lord's Resistance Airbag. Actually, on that note, how crazy is it to think that the Kony 2012 meme is now 14 years old? I was already an adult when that meme came out, and now I'm a much older adult. Maybe that depressing thought could form the basis of a new name, like some play on a band name, some like emo band, like My Chemical Explosion, or Dashboard Bombfessional. You know what, maybe we should just go back to the previous theme, keep it nice and simple. From now on, this section is going to be called Lord's Recall Army, because manufacturers are basically engaging in terrorism against their customers, and there are enough problems to form an army of angry customers. Hell, take it further, and you could arguably meet the Lord if you're unlucky enough. So there it is. It's time for Lord's Recall Army of the Week. Drawing on a familiar theme from previous weeks, a Stellantis product, this time the Peugeot 3008 and 5008, could have their wheels fall off because of badly tightened nuts. Models affected were produced from November 2024 to June 2025. If you own one of these, make sure to get your nuts seen to. Toyota Supras produced from September 2020 to August 2022 might become even hotter. Oh yes, we're talking about fires again. The starter relay may come into contact with water. This causes corrosion over time, and at its best will result in a car that doesn't start, at its worst a short circuit that could set the car alight. Second on the list for Toyota is the Prius, produced from 2023 to 2026. A little over 141,000 cars are affected by an issue that could cause the rear doors to fly open. Basically, there's an issue with the electrical switches that control the lock and unlock function. Much like with the Supra, albeit on a different part, water could get into these switches after something like a car wash and cause a short circuit. The only surprise for me here is that fire wasn't listed as a potential outcome too. Certain Honda Civics and HRVs produced from November 2014 to July 2021 could have their wheels fall off. Apparently the cars that have wheels without pressed-in hubs made of steel alloy, real specific, but anyway, have wheel nuts that weren't torqued correctly and may loosen, causing a wheel to fall off. In all honesty, I'd be pretty amazed if cars ranging from 5 to 12 years old have never had their wheels off since new, so the fact that this was even caught at all is pretty insane. Still, it is a recall, so I guess get it checked out if somehow you've never needed to have any maintenance on your car that requires taking the wheels off. BMW are going for the most models in a single recall medal this week, with a faulty starter solenoid that could lead to, at best, the car not starting and at worst, a fire. Up to 575,000 cars worldwide could be affected by this, and these cars would have a start relay manufactured between July 2020 and July 2022. Models affected include the 2 Series Coupe, 3 Series, 4 Series, 5 Series, 6 Series Gran Turismo, 7 Series, X4, X5, X6, and Z4. It seems that the ultimate driving machine is only ultimate when you can actually start it. For the last section, we're not going to pick on a manufacturer, we're just going to go with airbags, because there are so many airbag recalls this week that it's just easier to list the models. In fairness, the reason for this is pretty straightforward. Airbags are usually made by companies that supply many different OEMs, so if the issue starts with the supplier, every OEM downstream suffers too. Think of it as mutually assured destruction, except the destruction is on your face, and the only thing mutual is the OEMs passing the blame up the supply chain. Here's the full list of affected vehicles. And that is the end of the news.